Chapter 13 of Travel Stories Retold from St. Nicholas by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13, Dutch Cheeses by H. M. Smith. Among the daintiest and best of the numerous kinds of foreign and domestic cheeses that may be bought in nearly every American city and town are the small round cheeses with red or yellow coats which come to our markets from Holland. The ancient town of Edam, on the shore of the Zuider Zee, has given its name to this product, and almost everywhere in America we ask for Edam cheese when we want this particular kind. But while Edam produces Edam cheese, this sleepy little town long ago ceased to hold a high place in the cheese world, and neighboring towns now monopolize the trade of this article, which holds a leading place in the farm products of Holland. The most extensive and celebrated of the cheese markets is that of Alkmaar, which has the commercial advantage of being located on a railroad as well as on the North Holland Canal. Every visitor to the Netherlands should arrange to spend at least one day at Alkmaar, easily reached from Amsterdam or Haarlem. In Dutch history, Alkmaar is celebrated for its successful defense when besieged by the Spaniards in 1573, but in modern times it has been noted for its cheese trade, which is now its principal attraction. The market is held every Friday, but in order to observe all of its features, a visitor should go to Alkmaar the day before and see the preliminary preparations. The marketplace is a large stone-paved space in the open air, with business houses on three sides, a canal on the fourth, and a weigh-house at one end. During Thursday, the dairymen from the surrounding country arrive with their families and their cheeses, coming in carts, wagons, and canal boats, and by the afternoon of that day there is a great bustle, which continues far into the evening. Throughout the night, bands of young peasants, both men and women, parade the streets of Alkmaar, singing and skylarking, and cheese carts continue to arrive and clatter along the stony streets, so that little sleep is possible for the residents and visitors. An essential part of the cheese market is the official weigh-house, which was built more than 3 centuries ago out of an already existing church. Its shapely clock tower has moving figures of horsemen in a tourney, and a beautiful set of chimes, one of whose airs is the well-known wedding march from Wagner's Lohengrin. In the main room on the ground floor are 4 huge balances, which, before the opening of the market, are carefully adjusted with much ceremony by an official in silk hat and frock coat. When the cheeses are on their way to market from the farms, they are handled with great care, so as to prevent bruising or crushing, and whether in wagons or boats, they are arranged in layers separated by light boards. As the wagons and boats arrive at the marketplace, spaces are assigned to them, and the unloading begins, the cheeses being arranged in regular square or oblong piles on pieces of canvas, with narrow walks between. The size of the piles depends on the number of cheeses the individual farmers have to dispose of, but usually the piles are 8 to 10 cheeses wide, 30 to 50 long, and always 2 layers deep. At the market attended by the writer, the largest pile contained 900 cheeses. The unloading of the wagons and boats is one of the most interesting sights of the market. Standing in a wagon or boat, one man takes a cheese in each hand and throws them to another man, sitting or kneeling on the ground, who arranges the cheeses in regular piles. Long practice has made the farmers very skillful in tossing and catching. The cheeses go through the air in pairs as though tied together, and may be thrown as far as 30 feet. During very active times, the yellow balls are flying thickly in all directions. As soon as a farmer has arranged his stock of cheeses, he covers the piles with canvas, and often also with rush mats, grass, or straw, in order to protect them from sun or rain, and to prevent the drying of the surface. Before the sale, the vendors liberally anoint the cheeses with oil to make them look fresh and inviting. Shortly before 10 o'clock, a large number of aged porters meet in a room of the weigh house, and soon emerge dressed in scrupulously clean white trousers and shirts, with black slippers and straw hats. The hats are of blue, green, yellow, red, or other bright colors, with ribbons of the same shade hanging down behind, and the men wearing the same colors work together in pairs. Promptly as the clock in the weigh house tower strikes the hour of 10, the cheese market formally opens. The covers are removed from the piles of cheeses, and the whole marketplace literally bursts into bloom. Sales are preceded by much bargaining, and the cheeses are felt, smelled, and tasted. When a price is agreed upon for a particular lot, the buyer and the seller clasp hands, and then, the half hour having struck, the porters begin their labors, which consist in carrying to the weigh house loads of cheeses on sled-like trays suspended from their shoulders by long straps, receiving a check from the master of the scales, and returning their certified fare to the owners, who thus have a basis for determining the aggregate weight and value of each lot sold. So rapidly do the selling and weighing proceed that by 11 o'clock the market is virtually over. Then the cheeses are removed to the warehouses of the purchasing merchants, the farmers depart in their boats and wagons, and when the grand noonday burst of the chimes comes, the Alkmaar cheese market exists only as a memory. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of Travel Stories Retold from St. Nicholas by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14, A Geography City Come Alive by Mira Harbison. During the Great War, when the armies of Europe were trying to beat their way into Constantinople, this city, which once had been to us merely a black dot in our geographies, suddenly became very real. We used to know it as a point somewhere in the lower right-hand corner of the map, where Europe is separated from Asia by several annoying little bodies of water that were so hard for us to remember. But when I tell you that I ate a bag of peanuts while going in a ferry boat to Constantinople from Scutari, the little Asiatic village just opposite, you will understand the width of the Bosphorus better, perhaps, than your geography can tell you. The photograph presents a good general view of the city as seen from the Galata side, and shows clearly Santa Sophia and the Golden Horn, which divides in two parts this ancient and famous metropolis of the Ottoman Empire. From the roof of the American College buildings, which are on a hill in Scutari, we can look directly across toward the mouth of the Golden Horn. Stambul is the old part of the city, where many different peoples have dwelt. First Greeks, then Romans, now Turks, and you can still see, by a bit of a house or an old wall, how these people lived. Galata is where English, French, Italians, and Germans carry on their business in Turkey, and where the big boats unload their cargoes. Between Galata and Stambul is one of the most famous and most crowded bridges in the world. Pera is where most of the Europeans live. Constantinople is indeed like the fairy city in the Arabian Nights to which the poor brothers are whisked away on a carpet, a dream city on the edge of the water, a city of lavender-blue domes and minarets that seem to reach to the sky. We are just aware of the little houses struggling up the hill or dipping their feet in the water. The maze of houses and the mosques are veiled in a light blue haze, just as if the city, like the women, had to wear the yachmak, or head covering. Off beyond is the glistening sea of Marmora, and nearby the dazzling blue waters of the Bosphorus dotted with little black boats. The city stretches on farther up the shore, and just beyond are the wooded hills. At the foot of one of them, on the very edge of the water, is the long, low, white marble palace of the Sultan. Dolma Bakhtish it is called, which means walled-in garden. Everyone who is young must love Constantinople. It is so full of color and soft musical sounds that one is sure something unexpected and wonderful will happen any moment. Nowhere in the world, perhaps, can be seen so many different types of people as on Galata Bridge. Let us pay 10 paras, a little over 1 cent, and go on the bridge. We shall see and hear more than $1's worth. There go modern Turkish gentlemen, dressed like our fathers, but wearing fezzes instead of hats. A fez is made of soft red felt and has no brim. From the top hangs a black silk tassel. Here come old-fashioned Turkish gentlemen with bent shoulders and flowing beards. They wear soft padded overcoats of many colors, and each is sure to have on a ring set with a beautiful stone that he keeps turned toward the inside of his hand. There are some priests with white scarves around their fezzes. Here are others with green ones, because they have been to Mecca, where every pious Turk wants to go before he dies. There are whirling dervishes in brown overcoats and tall brown hats shaped like chicken croquettes. Have you ever heard of dervishes? They are priests who perform a peculiar ceremony in their religious houses. They take off their brown overcoats and dance in green or white costumes that have full pleated skirts. They spin round and round on their tiptoes, accompanied by strange music, while the chiefs of the order sit cross-legged on the floor and watch them. Then there may pass a Tartar pilgrim all in white from the interior of Asiatic Turkey, or a Persian in gray with a Persian lamb fez, or a fierce Kurd. The last is a soldier, and wears a brown hood with a long end knotted round his head. Since the Balkan War, when many Kurds were in Constantinople on their way to the army, the little Turkish girls have worn the same sort of hood of soft colors and fabrics. On the bridge, too, may be seen the shrouded Turkish ladies, who move silently along like black ghosts. They wear the çarşaf, the modern Turkish dress, which includes a veil over the face. Old-fashioned women of the poorer classes still wear the soft white yakmak that covers the head but not the face. And then, too, there are the hamals, wild peasants from the interior, who do the fetching and carrying. They wear little caps and bright sashes, and have on their backs a kind of saddle on which they put anything from a bag of flour to a piano. They walk faster than the rest and sing "Dustur, dustur," which means "get out of the road." If we are very lucky, we shall see a string of camels with their noses in the air, and on their humps lovely faded blue and red saddlebags. They are usually led by a donkey, and with them is a camel driver of most fetching appearance. The camels are so big and shaggy and out of place that we pinch ourselves to see if we are really awake. Now let us go wandering about the old city. The narrow, silent streets are paved with cobblestones and lined with houses that have never been painted, but have been colored by the sun, the rain, and the wind. Some of them are overgrown with wisteria vines that cross from one side of the street to the other and frame the big, shut front door. One fine day I lifted the knocker on one of these doors when calling on a Turkish family I knew. The door was opened silently, and I found myself in a tiny garden full of flowers. No matter how small his house, the Turk always has a bit of garden. If he is rich, he has it on a hill from which he can see the Bosphorus. The garden I visited opened from a bricked hall. We went up the stairs, and were greeted by the ladies of the family more courteously and gracefully than I ever have been greeted anywhere else. I wish I could describe for you the Turkish salutation. It is as hard to acquire as a foreign accent. As she bows, a lady makes a downward sweep with her arm, then raises her hand, palm upward, to her heart and lips. This means, I am at your service, my heart is yours, the words that I speak are in your favor. I was taken into a room all windows. The Turk loves windows as he loves gardens, windows that look out over the water. All around the room are bright-colored sedias, low, hard couches, which are, however, very comfortable to sit or lie upon. In the middle of the room on a brass tray was a big brazier containing live coals, on which the daughter of the house soon made Turkish coffee. Besides gardens and windows, the Turk loves coffee, his own peculiar kind that you must taste some day along with the other goodies. This is the way it was made for me. Into a brass coffee maker, which looks like a pitcher with a long handle, were put 1 sugar lump and 1 coffee cupful of water. When this had boiled, 1 teaspoonful of finely powdered Turkish coffee, taken from a china egg on the tray, was put into the water. This mixture was allowed to come to a boil 3 times, and then poured, the pitcher being held a foot from the cup so that there would be foam on the coffee. I tried to drink it in the really Turkish way, holding the saucer with the cup to my lips. If you try it, you will see how hard it is to do this easily. A little sister showed us her drawing book, in which she had begun at the back and worked toward the front. The Turkish children recite their lessons all together in the old-fashioned schools, and if you could hear them, you would think that you had gone into Wonderland with Alice, where things wouldn't come straight. The little girls go to school in groups, and with them is always an old servant who carries all their books on what looks for all the world like a small clothes tree. The boys go and come in 2 long lines, attended by their teacher. They carry their own books and wear long trousers and fezzes exactly like those of their fathers. Some of the tiny girls carry their own little tables and drawing boards. In the gypsy village in Scutari, the children learn their lessons by songs in the street. They stand in a circle with a big girl in the middle, and they grow noisier and noisier the more interested they become. These little girls wear shelvars, which look like little trousers gathered in at the ankle. I tried to take a picture of a little girl in an orange-colored pair and of a boy in a wrapper and fez, but they were frightened and ran away crying. Now I must tell you about the Turkish shops, the really Turkish ones. Most of them are about the size of a spider's parlor and have no front wall, so you see the wares can be temptingly displayed to the passer-by. You see in one of our pictures a shop where all kinds of blankets and scarves are sold. The scarves are especially useful. If you are a man, you can wind one round your fez or your waist. If you are a lady, you can wear it indoors as a shawl, sash, or scarf. Or, if it is the right kind, a little girl can wear it to school on her head. You don't know which one to choose when they are tossed down in front of you, a riotous mingling of reds, browns, oranges, golds, and yellows. Another fascinating shop is a bead shop. Most of them are together on the bead street. There you may see displayed all kinds of strings of beads, long and short, large and small beads, red, yellow, and blue, of amber, meerschaum, and olive wood. The Turkish gentlemen carry the short strings, and when they chat they play with the beads unconsciously, but always in the same way. They move them forward with the thumb and first finger, 2 at a time, 1 from each side of the string. When all have been moved, they turn the string about and move the beads in the opposite direction. Then there is the rug shop. The Turkish rug merchant offers you tea or coffee and cigarettes, as he hopes you will spend much money. And while you drink, he throws down before you rugs, 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 soft, rich, alluring, from Baluchistan, Kurdistan, Persia. But you, I am sure, would prefer a candy shop. Even if you have tasted our Turkish paste, you have only a remote idea of how succulent a goody the real lukmui is. Then there's halva, full of nuts and all sorts of other good things which you can never guess. It is sticky, and when you bite it, it nearly pulls your teeth out. Then there are koribis and smits, both of which are cakes which you must buy in a ferry boat to get the real flavor. A man comes in, carrying a basket in one hand and waving a sheet of paper in the other. The koribis are stuck to this paper, and you pull them off yourself. The smits are on a stick which protrudes from the top of the basket, for you must know that a schmidt is shaped like a doughnut, only the hole has grown larger without affecting the size of the eatable part. This part is not sweet, and is covered with aniseed. It would make your mouth water if I should tell you of all the delectable dishes you might have in the cafés all over the city. The Turk loves to eat, he loves to sit, and he loves to stare at his garden, at his beloved Bosphorus, or at space. They never say in Turkey, "Where do you live?" but always, "Where do you sit?" In spring and autumn the hills about Constantinople are dotted with spots of colour. They are the Turkish men and women sitting on the grass. And what a wonderful view they look at! There they sit for hours and hours, usually silent, occasionally chatting, sometimes grunting in descending tones. The chief other thing a Turk does in times of peace is to pray. From the gallery of a minaret the muezzin calls him to prayer 5 times a day. Do you know what a minaret is? It is the tower of the Turkish church or mosque. Mosques built by royalty may have 2 minarets, others only 1. These minarets are slender, very tall, with a gracefully pointed top that draws the eye right up to the sky. There is a Turkish proverb that says, "Never steal a minaret unless you have a place to hide it in." 2/3 of the way up there is a carved gallery, very light and beautiful, where the priest stands and chants down through the air the call to prayer, which in English prose is this: "There is no God but Allah. Mohammed is his prophet. Let us go and pray. Let us go save our souls. God is great. There is no God but God." A pious Turk either goes to the mosque or prays wherever he may happen to be. I once saw a soldier praying on a ferry boat. Inside the mosque the cooing of many pigeons adds to the rhythmic murmur of the prayers. There are pigeons inside and outside of all the mosques. One, of which a picture is shown here, is called the Pigeon Mosque. The most famous mosque of all is Santa Sophia, once a Christian church, as you can tell by its name, built by the Byzantine Greeks about 300 A.D. It is yellow, weathered by time, is very big, and on top of a hill. Inside it is a dark golden brown, and the pigeons flying around under the roof seem to be far, far above you. The rugs on the floor are all on a slant because the church was built originally with the altar toward the east. Later the Moslems made it face toward Mecca, southeast of Constantinople. No Turk ever walks on these rugs with his shoes on. He leaves them at the door or carries them in his hand, and before he comes in to pray, he washes his feet and hands at the fountain outside, no matter how cold the water or the weather. Fountains are everywhere in Constantinople, made of white marble and exquisitely carved. Constantinople has been famous in history ever since the legend that Leander died in swimming the Hellespont, the old name of the Dardanelles. Nations have quarreled over it because it is one of the most wonderfully situated cities in the world, and Constantine the Great made it the capital of his huge empire. You will study all that in Roman history if you have not studied it already, and will read also of its capture by the Turks under Mohammed the Conqueror nearly 500 years ago. The history of the Ottoman Empire makes the most exciting fairy tales seem colorless. Perhaps you do not know that when Henry VIII of England and Francis I of France were forming a mutual admiration society of their 2 kingdoms on the Field of the Cloth of Gold, there was another king, as great as either of them, in the southeast of Europe, carving great pieces out of other countries for his empire. This Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, was a great lawgiver. His reign was the height of Turkey's power. Soon after its close, the rest of Europe became interested in Turkey, especially Russia and England. Recently, German influence has been stronger than any other at the Turkish court. That is why Turkey fought on the side of Germany, and why England and France determined to storm the forts and brave the mines in the water entrances to Constantinople, and so open up a way to the Mediterranean for their great ally, Russia. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Travel Stories Retold from St. Nicholas by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 15 The Giant and the Genie by George Frederick Stratton. Far up on the slopes of Mount Rainier in Washington is a waterfall which, according to the legend, was inhabited by a giant of enormous strength, Menuhkesen by name. From out of the east there came a genie possessed of such courage and audacity that when he was warned against the terrible powers of Menuhkesen, he laughed lustily and said that he would call forth the surly giant and make him do his bidding. Summoning his afrits, he gave them orders, and they immediately surrounded the falls, some of them peering through strange instruments and making mysterious signs with their hands, while others measured distances and drove stakes, bearing weird symbols, into the river banks. Then the genie stood on the bank overlooking the falls and shouted, "Ho, afrits, dig me here a deep hole!" And immediately they went to work with great activity. When they had dug down 100 feet, the genie commanded them to tunnel under the falls. "We will unearth this giant and prove his strength," he cried defiantly. So they dug a tunnel until they reached a great mass of rock underneath the brink of the falls, and here they hewed out a huge cavern, and carried into it strange machines and many wheels, fastening them all strongly. And they hung wires from those machines, stringing them a long distance through dense woods and across ghostly ravines to where many men lived and worked. When all was ready, the genie grasped a great lever and shouted, "Ho, Menuhkesen, come forth now and get busy." Then he pressed down the lever, and instantly the spirit sprang out of the falls, and leaping upon a wire, rushed along it with such swiftness that no one could see him. The next moment he was many miles away, performing marvelous feats of strength, pushing great street cars at incredible speed, turning the wheels in mills and factories, and lighting stores and dwellings. In fact, he did whatever the genie ordered him to do, without an instant's delay or any demur. All over these big, resourceful United States, Menuhkesen is found, but the modern captains of industry call him Electricity. The genii also are with us, graduates of technical colleges or of engineering departments of great factories, who, donning khaki clothes and high-laced leather boots, camp out in the wild mountain fastnesses, or on the weird deserts, or in the dense forests, and invoke the giants they meet everywhere in this wonderful country. But it is the western mountain regions which chiefly hold the romance, the tragedy, and the gigantic power of the mythical old giant. All up and down the Rockies and the Sierras, and in the network of stupendous mountains which cross the 500 or 600 miles between, are mountain torrents tearing down from summits perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 feet high to the valleys below. Some of them are very small in appearance, but possessed of tremendous force. Let us trace one of these and discover the giant. We hike or ride a sure-footed horse 6 miles up one of the somber gashes in the mountains, called canyons, arriving at the origin of a stream we have seen growing smaller as we ascended. We find a little spring gushing from beneath a huge boulder and trickling down through the ferns and brush. Soon it is joined by other little streams on the right or left. Presently, as we stumble along down the rocky trail, we see on one side a wide, deep gulch, with walls of sandstone or granite rising almost perpendicularly on either side. And that gulch has snow lying on it, perhaps 40 feet deep, the drifts of last winter, or slides from the slopes above it. The snow may then have been 60 or 100 feet deep, but now in midsummer it is dwindling fast, and its water doubles or triples the size of our little stream. Suddenly we see that the wild, rocky torrent bed has been cleaned out, and that the banks are lined up with rock. The genie has been giving orders. A few rods farther, that torrent bed gives place to a timber flume, and the next moment that flume, instead of keeping on the sharply sloping floor of the canyon, rises on trestles, holding an almost level position. The trestle increases in height as the ground beneath them slopes downward, and cross a deep gulch still holding the little torrent running between the wooden walls of the flume. From our trail beneath, we see the flume now skirting round the waist of some stupendous mountain, then crossing other gulches, and soon appearing on the summit of a peak 800 feet above where we are standing. Below, at the foot of that peak, is a small, plain stone building, and wriggling down from the summit is apparently a huge black snake, poking its nose into the basement of that house. The house holds the generators for turning the force of that torrent into electricity. The snake is the penstock, a great black steel pipe twisting and turning to avoid the huge boulders in its path as it conducts that water from the summit into the turbines in the house. The turbine is an enclosed water wheel in which every particle of force in the rushing water is used to turn a great steel shaft. On the other end of that shaft is geared the generator, the wonderful machine with wire-wound arms which makes the electric current. At this particular powerhouse, the little torrent, which reaches the summit in a flume 30 inches wide and 2 feet deep, turns out 800 horsepower. It is the force, not the size, of the stream which gives that power, for water has a pressure of about 50 pounds per square inch for every 100 feet of the height of its source. So this water has a pressure at the turbine of 400 pounds per square inch, a far greater pressure than that in the cylinders of a great mogul mountain locomotive. The little stream, freed from the turbines, whirls furiously down a small basin and rollicks off on a wild headlong dash through an open sluiceway for a short distance. Then another flume arrests it, and as we hike along down the trail, that flume rises above us, straddling gulches on high trestles, and at 2 points tunneling through a great mountain. We get back to the mouth of the canyon, and there see, on the level we have then reached, another powerhouse, larger than the first. Behind it is another huge, bare mountain of rock, and coming down that, another gigantic black snake, also poking its head into the powerhouse. This snake, or penstock, is 1,600 feet long, and the same stream which developed 800 horsepower at the upper house is now, with the addition of a little water picked up on the way, reeling off 2,600 horsepower at this house. This imprisoned, raging torrent is now released, and flows in a subdued, gentle stream down a natural stream bed. It is less than 8 feet wide, and not deep enough to wet our horses' knees as we ford across. But we gaze upon it with the awe and amazement it deserves, when we remember that, but a few moments before, it has sent its great power over 11 miles of wire to a small town, is operating several factories, and will, at night, light all the streets and the houses. And that is only half its work. Before us is a great stretch of orchards and fields, vividly green, although they have not had one drop of water from the heavens for 3 or 4 months. All their health and vigor and wonderful productivity is due to that little stream, which irrigates over 3,000 acres of the land. Within 20 miles of where this is written, at the foot of the great Wasatch Mountains in Utah, are 5 such canyons with powerhouses, 2 of them with 2 houses in each canyon. All over this mountain country, from the middle of Utah to the Canadian line, are hundreds of such mountain torrents, only a small proportion of which are yet harnessed for work. Some of them are very much larger than the one we have visited. Come with me to one of these larger houses. It is in a canyon of awful sublimity, so deep and so nearly unapproachable that the construction teams had to haul over 8 miles of zigzag trail to make the descent of less than half a mile to the torrent. We scramble down over the rocks and brush, and although the roar of the water reaches us for 10 or 15 minutes before we see it, we are by no means prepared for the astounding scene when it at last comes into view. Out from the depths of the great ugly building belch forth 4 gleaming horizontal columns of water, big as barrels, with a force, speed, and roar as though the discharge were from giant cannon. Straight across the tail race they gleam and quiver for 100 feet, impinging upon a solid ledge of granite, in which they have worn huge caverns. The spray dashes up the face of the ledge for 60 or 70 feet. Up and down the stream, swirling and writhing in 1,000 rushing, crowding whirlpools, the water, just freed from its maddening confinement, is seeking to make good its escape. But it is jammed back into the upper race, and for 50 yards you will see it hanging ledge upon ledge, fighting, snarling, surging, and struggling for its chance to slip beneath those terrific outlet volleys and gain the lower stream and liberty and peace. The mighty Niagara has no such background of wild beauty, nor does it ever convey such an instant impression of water force. Once I saw a big 2-inch plank dropped into one of those furious water columns. It seemed scarcely to touch the water, but flew faster than the eye could follow over to the granite ledge, and was instantly smashed into 10,000 splinters, and I knew that even before the plank had reached the ledge, the mighty power which hurled it, transmuted into electricity, had already reached and was operating street cars in a city 70 miles away. Come into the powerhouse. Look at the 4 gigantic generators whirling and humming like Leviathan June bugs. See the wicked, sputtering little blue sparks from the commutators. From the windows at the back of the building we look up a very sharp slope, 1,500 feet high, and see the penstocks, 24-inch steel tubes, black, ungainly, and at twilight very uncanny. They follow in curves the profile of the rough ground, bringing the furious rush of water from the summit down to the turbines in the lower basement, turning out 26,000 horsepower. The force of the water in these penstocks is terrific. Tests of a 4-inch jet from one of them have been made. A rifle bullet glances off as from chilled steel. A jet from it, no bigger than a penholder, will drill a hole in sheet steel in a few moments. At the reservoir on the summit a fly line may be played in the water. At the foot of the penstock no mortal could thrust a bayonet 1 inch into it. A United States trooper once essayed in a wager to cut a 2-inch jet with his sword. A shattered weapon and a broken wrist resulted. In the harnessing and curbing of these mountain streams, the utmost engineering skill and ingenuity has been called into play. Often the powerhouse has to be situated miles back in such inaccessible wilds that the greatest difficulty has been encountered in carrying machinery and supplies to the spot. At one point in the Sierras, men and material were transported across 2 yawning chasms by means of wire cables, under which ran a freight carrier. The Feather River in California makes a big horseshoe bend 25 miles above Oroville, coming within 3 miles of itself again. An enormous mountain intervenes, but the engineers tunneled that and diverted the water into that tunnel. In the lower end of that black, rushing underground torrent are placed the great turbines and generators. The most striking instance of the results of securing a big headway for a small stream is shown in San Juan County, Colorado. The Animas River in its course between Silverton and Durango, a distance of 20 miles, has a gradual fall of about 1,500 feet. Although called a river, it is but a mountain stream, tumbling over little falls and through rock-strewn gullies, at no point showing more power than would be sufficient to drive a very small grist mill. But the genius of science has so cunningly diverted it and concentrated its energy as to develop at last 40,000 horsepower. A dam was built a few miles below Silverton, and the water turned into a flume, which is only 6 by 8 feet in size. It will be seen that it must be a very small stream whose waters can be run through such a restricted channel. Across fearful canyons and around great mountains, through tunnels and cuttings, that flume carries the water for 16 miles to the edge of a great cliff near Durango. The cliff is over 1,000 feet high, and the pipe runs over the edge and makes a perpendicular drop into the powerhouse below. From the 4-foot steel pipe, nozzles 5/8 of an inch in diameter conduct the water into the turbines, whirling them at a speed of 4,000 revolutions per minute. The speed of the jets of water shooting from those nozzles is 25,000 feet, or over 4 miles per minute. Note how the wizards of industry further concentrate and control the giant they have evoked. That 40,000 horsepower making that mighty plunge over the cliff is met by magical machines and switched into a wire but little larger than a lead pencil. 40 feet of that unyielding steel flume which held the power is a load for a freight car. 40 feet of the wire which carries the power is but a small load for a 6-year-old boy. At one moment the power is in that roaring, headlong, terrific plunge. The next it is miles away, invisible, noiseless, and mysterious, illuminating great arc lamps, running heavy cars, and, to come from great to small, whirling dainty fans or cooking an egg. There are other marvelous power plants situated on rivers where, although the force is far less than that of the mountain torrents, the volume of water is far greater. Idaho shows the most remarkable of the developments of such water power, and the astounding ingenuity and determination of the Genie are shown as much as in the mountains. The Bear River, which runs through Idaho and Utah, carries a very large flow at an exceedingly rapid rate for a river. At one point in Idaho, no less than 6 great powerhouses have been installed on that river, producing a total of nearly 200,000 horsepower. In order to secure good headway and the force which this gives, 2 enormous pipe lines have been built to take the water from upper reaches of the river and, while holding that pipe almost to a level, run it across country to a lower reach where a powerhouse is built, thus increasing the headway from nothing to 200 or 300 feet. One of these lines is of 11-foot pipe, nearly 5 miles long. The other is a 16-foot pipe, half a mile long. Almost all of the current produced at these plants is transmitted by cable to Salt Lake City, 135 miles away. It has been said by expert engineers of electrical development that it will be but a short time before the Intermountain region will use no coal, that all smokestacks and chimneys will be abolished, and electricity furnish all the power, heat, and light not only to cities and towns, but to farming communities. We are on the way. There are some districts now where villages, towns, and farms all use electricity for power and for lighting and cooking. This is notably so in Rupert, Idaho, the home of the famous electric high school described in St. Nicholas in September 1913. All through that town the lighting and cooking in even the humblest homes is by electricity. The few small factories use no coal or steam power. In the mountain region, over 100 cities, towns, and rural communities have electric wires in their houses. All are lighted by them, and very many have thrown out coal ranges and cook by electricity. The region is one of mines everywhere, some of them the largest in the world, and nearly all of them have discarded their gigantic steam, hoisting, and pumping engines for electric motors. There is, it is asserted, more than enough water power running to waste to do every particle of work now done by steam, horses, and men and women in the region, from impelling the enormous 16-wheeled mountain moguls to rocking the babies' cradles by motor. Across the northern part of Idaho and Montana, over a wicked country of mountains and canyons, the western division of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad runs all its trains by electricity, as you have read in your last month's number of St. Nicholas, while farther south, across Utah and Colorado, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad Company completed its plans 3 years ago for the electrification of its road to Denver. But the scheme of the Kaiser to lick the world in 90 days failing, material became too costly to warrant the change from steam to electricity. But the power is ready, or could quickly be made ready. Every year the two great companies which have been formed by the consolidation of numerous small owners of power plants are building dams and reservoirs and flumes, getting ready for the not far distant day when steam engines will have to be looked for in the Museum of Antiques and Curiosities in Salt Lake City. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of Travel Stories Retold from St. Nicholas by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 16, Out in the Big Game Country by Clarence H. Rowe. In the big game country, is there a healthy, red-blooded American boy who does not feel a thrill of excitement at the thought? In spite of our civilization, there is, in many, a lingering thrill in the very thought of the chase, handed down through a long line of ancestry dating back to the time when the chase meant food rather than sport. The stage setting for big game is perfect. In the sheep country of Wyoming or the deer country of Colorado, it is at an altitude of from 9,000 to 13,000 feet above sea level, where the air is clear and crisp with the tang of winter, the huge stretches of wild open country lying like a picture at one's feet. Could anything be more beautiful and invigorating? A reconnoitering point will sometimes reveal a view of almost 100 miles. Across a gulch of some 20 miles, the distant buttresses of red sandstone rock are painted with slashes of golden copper, the somber pines straggling almost to the top, interwoven with the delicate tracery of the quaking aspens, now beautifully colored by the frosts. At our feet nestles a park, as the valleys are called, and possibly a silvery thread of water winds in and out. Nature paints with a full, rich palette in this glorious western country. The skies ravel those of Italy in depth, and while possibly a bit more crude in raw color, are, for this very reason, more in keeping with the broad, vigorous landscape. In the big game country, everything is big, not only the game, but the mountains, the valleys, and the people. Small statures bred in these surroundings expand and broaden. It is only natural. All this seems far removed from the subject of elk, Rocky Mountain sheep, and bear, but to every true sportsman these constitute fully one half of the game. The Rocky Mountain sheep are by far the most majestic and dignified of the animals of this locality. They are fond of the rock-studded mountain sides, and often a huge sentinel ram, silhouetted against the sky, will reveal the feeding place of a group of ewes and lambs. The task now, if one is fortunate enough to be to the windward of him, is, after tethering your horse, to work slowly and carefully to within range, usually from 200 to 400 yards. Distances out there are most deceptive, owing to the clear, rarefied air, and an object that seems to be a few hundred yards distant may prove to be almost a mile. Elk come next, and the lucky, hungry hunter who has bagged his 6-point buck would need more space than at my command to tell how he did it. Antelope surpass both sheep and elk for timidity. They are extremely wary, and possibly the most difficult of all game to get within range. They are found in the lower and open country. Underlying all the hopes and expectations in the hunter's mind is the thought of bear, and of course first of these stands the grizzly. These are getting scarcer every year, and most of us, if we must get a bear, will have to be content with a yearling or a 2-year-old black bear. There is no special country for them. As a rule, in the summer and fall, they come down in the low parks to feast on the berries. Toward winter they are more likely to be found higher up the slopes. After the first snow, an occasional raid on the highest and loneliest ranches is looked upon by Bruin as the thing. At one of the ranches, nestling at the foot of Mount Evans in Colorado, miles away from any other habitation, A rancher put a cowbell on each of his horses when turned loose, thinking to frighten the bears. Bruin had a penchant for the frisky little colts gambolling about the mountainside, and thought it quite neighborly to chase the whole herd, mares and all, helter-skelter down to the ranch. It was quite common for the rancher to be aroused at night by the clanging of bells and the clatter of hoofs as the horses scampered into the corral. Sheep, elk, and bear all go above the timberline. The height of this line varies in different sections. 10,000 to 10,500 feet is an average. A good wiry horse that isn't gun-shy and will allow packing the game back to camp is a necessity, for often a bag is made too far from camp for a regular pack animal to bring in. Above all, in the confusion of getting together the regular camp outfit, don't forget to slip a paper of trout flies and line into the duffel bag. The little streams winding through the parks will reward an hour's casting with half a dozen or so delicious mountain trout, running from 6 to 10 inches in length. They are small, but make up in quality and flavor. When the hunt is over, we take our parting, look at the grim old mountains, so silent and peaceful, and wend our way back to civilization, happy and humble in the overpowering glory and majesty of what the natives call God's own country. End of chapter 16. End of Travel Stories Retold from St. Nicholas by Various.